Welcome to Decker Tech. I'm Aaron Decker, and today we're doing a guide on Heiner, the drunken robot himself. This is going to be a Heiner tank guide, not a DPS or crack or anything like that, or fire. This is idea for a frontline Heiner. Heiner got me through the grind from, I would say, Madness 4 to Madness 12 pretty easily. Heiner does kind of fall off a little bit in the higher tiers of difficulty just because Heiner is slow. Heiner is a robot, very metallic and clunky, but very awesome. Before we get too much into it, great appreciation to those that have offered some tips and support. Those go a long way. If you do like what you see, the best way to encourage more of it and more of this content are compliments, feedback. Those are the things that keep me motivated and keep me going. So with the robot, the passive here is actually very beneficial to all builds of him. Beginning of combat, all our heroes gain block, and Heiner gains fortify. This is because Heiner is slow and will not be able to AoE block for the team before the enemies take their turn without some sort of artificial speed increase. So to help kind of combat the fact that Heiner is the slowest tank in the game, your team kind of starts with a little bit of block. And I say a little bit of block because even though you're going to get block talents, or perks, this does not scale very well, and you can't really rely on it to keep your team healthy. But the most important part of here is the Heiner gains 2 Fortify. Fortify is kind of the mainstream ability for Heiner, making block go from turn to turn, since at the end of the turn is when Heiner usually goes. He applies block, and for that block to be utilized for the future turns, you got to have the Fortify. So early game, it's all about making sure we have that Fortify going, and even in the late game, but in late game it's a lot easier to do, and it's a lot more straightforward on how we maintain Fortify on the team. But as it is, Heiner starts with it on himself, and with the perks, it is a sustainable amount, and you don't really have to worry about getting Fortify on Heiner in the early game. Alright, next, talents-wise, we're going to be mostly down this right side here. We'll kind of split over to this left side. Left side is about fire and lasers and stuff like that. Right side here is more to the defensive stuff. So Steel Forge, possibly the strongest defensive card in the game. This is really how we're going to get, and what we're going to rely on getting Fortify on our team in early game. It's a one cost that says, hey, anytime we block, our whole team gets shields, including yourself. So this will trigger itself and keep itself going. So once you have Steel Forge up, you will be maintaining Steel Forge, and it has 8 uses. So unless the enemy team, the monsters kind of burn through it in one turn, odds are this is going to last 2 or 3 turns for you. And while it's happening, your entire team will get super protected anytime Heiner takes damage. A little bit of taunt kind of helps make this trigger itself, but usually you don't need any taunt. It'll kind of just randomly trigger just from because most monsters will be attacking the front, or any given combat. There's going to be enough front attacks to make this hit the rest of the team and kind of help smooth out damage on the team. And you also notice it does add Fortify charges to the team. Fortify do not stack, but it is enough Fortify to last, so that that shield will last to the next turn for the whole, slow robot is slow kind of thing. Next up, we got Defense Mastery. This just says, hey, defense cards cost 1 less when they start in your hand. There's a little anti-synergy with some of the starting cards we're going to have here, because any sort of card draw makes these types of talents weaker. But in the long run, as long as we can get 1 or 2 defense cards in our starting hand, this is just a great boon to us. Free energy is best energy. Next up, we've got either Last Guardian or Fusion Lasers. Last Guardian's pretty cool. It's got a lot of nice numbers on it, but it does a lot of things we don't really need. If we're going to lose, it's usually not Heiner that dying first, and this only targets self. It does increase our Fortify charges, which is nice, but for the most part, this is really just a 20% resistances to Heiner, and Heiner is not likely going to be the one dying. So what we really want to pick up is this Fusion Lasers. I recommend Fusion Lasers for a couple reasons. Mainly, it's just the fact that it's a 1 energy, at least 6 vulnerable to the enemy team. Because if you read this, it says whenever you play a card, for every energy apply a vulnerable. But then you also add your vulnerable perks to this. So if you have that +1 vulnerable perk, then even when you're just kind of playing a 1 energy card 3 times, this is going to be 6 vulnerable. And if you're playing bigger cards, it's even more vulnerable. So this is just a fantastic application of vulnerable to the enemy team. Once Heiner has this, the enemy team is in for it. really helps increase the damage of your team drastically. Last Guardian is a nice safe bet, but Fusion Laser is just a much better overall card for the power of our team. And then last but not least, Indomitable and Tireless are both kind of meh for what we're doing. I say that because Tireless is just +1 energy. Don't get me wrong, +1 energy is great. But Defense Mastery will give us more energy than that over the long term. But I'm not going to say no to +1 energy, and this is the one I usually go to. Because Indomitable, what it says is, hey, if you fully block a hit, as in you take only damage to your shields, not to yourself, then you gain half the shields back. Heiner doesn't really need shields. This is really only, I would say the Indomitable is only if we're going to a DPS version of Heiner, where we're trying to do lots of shield charges. And if we were doing that, we'd be going stuff like Iron Furnace and trying to do other things. But as a frontliner, just here to keep the team alive, Indomitable doesn't really help with that, because Heiner rarely runs out of block. Like, once block is going on a Heiner, it's not going to fall off very easily. So, the Indomitable just, it helps you in a time when you don't need help, because it's only effective when you have block going, and once you have block going, then you're not in trouble. So, it's what I'd term a win more card, or a win more talent. And we don't really have too many payoffs for this. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. Maybe if you do have some other cards that you really want lots of shield on Heiner, go for this. But I'm not going to recommend it. And remember, this is, you gain shield, not block. So that shield charges you don't get right away, you get it for the next turn. So there's, it's not as effective. It doesn't help out or shore up any weak points of Heiner in this build. All right, let's go to the starting cards. I normally pull up the starting deck, but a little unprepared here. So there's a little bit of splurging here on this Heiner deck that I normally don't recommend, but it's really expensive to upgrade these bluffs. So I'm trying to find an example here. If you're on, so the bluffs, I've already upgraded them, so we don't see the cost, but it's like 500 shards or gems with a fully upgraded town to do this. But that said, if you can afford it, this is a great thing to upgrade to the 0 cost, because at 1 cost, this is not doing us any favors. Bluff is just not 1 energy to draw a card to do some blunt damage here, just isn't cutting it. But when we upgrade it to the 0 cost, then it's suddenly just a free card in our deck. It's basically a boon, other than the fact that this is the card that kind of counterplays against that Defense Mastery once you have it. Because once we have Defense Mastery, if we have Bluff in our opening hand instead of Guard, or whatever our equivalent defense card is at the time, then we don't get the discount on the Bluff when we draw the Guard and we have to pay the full price for it. But at the same time, we still got through our deck faster, and deck consistency is one of the strongest things. So if you can afford it, upgrade these. If you can't, go ahead and cut these. Like, if you're not going to upgrade them, they're the first thing you should cut, because they cost energy. And things that cost energy that aren't part of our main game plan are the weakest liability in our deck, because we don't want to spend energy on things that aren't part of our game plan, and attacking is not part of our game plan. So with that, I also took out Shield Charge. Now this is the one where I'm saying, hey, yeah, it's nice to have block on Heiner and stuff, but even say we had 200 block on Heiner, then Shield Charge only does 80 damage. And I say only 80 damage because normally your damage dealer in the team can be doing hundreds of damage in their attack. And they can do it for a couple energy, and they can do it to hit the whole team. Shield Charge only hits front monster. It requires you to have lots of blocks. So by itself, like, to make Shield Charge effective, you have to be spending lots of energy and lots of resources into it before you even play it. Does that make any sense? Like, Shield Charge doesn't cost 2 for 80 damage. It costs 2 plus 6. So it costs like 8 energy for 80 damage. Because for you to get a decent amount of block up, you have to have played multiple defense cards. And to have played multiple defense cards, you have to pay their full price. And you have not have spent that block from preventing enemy damage yet. So the numbers, the math does just not check out. There is a whole, like, if you're going to play a DPS Heiner and you want to play into Shield Charge, this is not the guide for it. This guide, the whole point of our shield is to defend our team, keep our team alive. And if we're trying to spend resources into making Shield Charge viable, then we're not spending those resources into making our team more stable and survive. Does that make any sense? Like, lower difficulties, you can do both. But as you progress in the difficulties, you really can't focus on two things at once here with something like Heiner. So I recommend cutting the shield charges. Don't be baited into trying to play around them. They're cool, they're fun, but you have to just dump so many resources into making it effective. And instead of doing that, you can be a much more productive frontliner. Keep your team alive, apply massive amounts of vulnerable, and just nuke down the enemy team as a robot. You're a robot here punching with your little metal shields and putting dents in the enemies so that your teammates can come in behind them and knock them over, if that makes any sense. Like, you are the setup. You are not the punch. So cards we've added the Helping Hands, the Repair Armor. So if you notice, Heiner is one of the tanks that doesn't actually have a Reinforce card in his starting deck. So none of these cards say Reinforce, and this is a very key part of the survival of your team. It's one of those buffs. The big game, especially in the early acts, the majority of damage is actually physical damage. So slashing, blunt, or piercing, which is what Reinforce helps mitigate damage-wise. Yes, if you have block up, Reinforce doesn't matter, but you're not always going to have block up. So you want the Reinforce as an option, especially to get on the frontliner. The front and the back are the two that take the most physical damage. You'll notice if you run into like harpies or assassins, like there's a lot of assassin type monsters that'll attack your back line, and that's when you really want this Repair Armor or something that applies Reinforce. And of the Reinforce options, the one that best suits Heiner is the Repair Armor because it's a zero cost defense. You can use it on yourself when you don't need it for the back line. These AoE shield ones, like usually Barricade is what Magnus does, but Heiner can't do that because he goes slow and the AoE block is usually wasted because he went after the monsters. And then you don't have any. Bree uses Battle Shout, but you don't have anything that plays into skills, so you don't want Battle Shout. And as you just go through these cards, the ones that apply Reinforce, yes, you could upgrade the guard. That's actually a very good option. But the problem with upgrading the guard is you actually want the guard for the Fortify. So if you had alternate means of Fortify, which you don't, then you could go to the blue guard and do the Reinforce. But or the problem with the Steel Skin is it only does yourself. So each of these has their weaknesses, and so the best source of Reinforce for Heiner, I find, is the Repair Armor. You want the zero cost version so you never feel bad playing it and you always have the option to play it. And you really only need one, maybe two. I'd recommend two if you have the space for it. But once you get used to what enemies do what, you don't have to play around it too much. But it's mainly your front line and your back line that need the Reinforce buff. And that's what you'll be casting this Repair Armor on. Also, Repair Armor has the nice benefit of removing Mark, which a lot of monsters can do in the early game especially. Let's see, we've added all the vulnerables. We've added the Intimidates and the Howls. If you're unfamiliar with that, vulnerable is the strongest DPS increase, such that, I make a couple videos about it, and it gets nerfed here soon. Like, by the time you're watching this, there may be a nerf in the mix for vulnerable here. What can I say? I'm good at what I do. But even with the changes, vulnerable will be one of the best damage multipliers in the game, and your frontliner is the best person to apply them. So Intimidates and Howls are currently the best version of that. You might be picking up an Impale if you're feeling feisty. We also upgrading the Sunder Armors. With the Sunder Armor, the argument between the blue one and the yellow one. So the yellow one costs one less, but only fronts monster. And the blue one targets any monster, but costs 3. Now, ideally, we want to hit any monster because we want to be very specific on who we hit with this vulnerable stacks. But Heiner's deck really can't afford that because the most important cards for us to play are these guards, because we need to start putting Fortify on our team. Because in order for Heiner to successfully apply block to his teammates as the slowest person on the field, he has to give them Fortify, so when he shields them, the turn ends, we go to the next turn, and they still have that block. So these guards are very important to our game plan, and we have to always play them when we draw them. And because we only get 3 energy a turn, we only start with anywhere from 3 to 7, depending on your difficulty and perks. You can't fit in a 3-cost Sunder Armor as easily as you can the 2 when you're playing a bunch of 2s. And you're also going to have to be able to fit in this Piercing Howl or this Heat Laser as it comes up. So just the way hands turn out, math turns out, yes, we prefer the 3-cost Sunder Armor, but we just really can't afford it for energy purposes. and for playing the amount of cards that we need every turn. So the Sunder Armor gives us a viable option between, you can choose between Guard and Sunder, because with a 3-cost one you have to choose between 1 Sunder and 2 Guards, or, you know what I mean? I'm belaboring that a bit, but 2-cost Sunder, it's unfortunate necessity that we have to do the front monster, but you can usually kind of weave that in and just apply these intimidates to the black line targets and focus, because you know that the Sunder Armor can only hit the front. Keeping the guards for now. Eventually, we're going to want better sources of Fortify, but depending on your difficulty, and because we don't have that level 3 talent, you're just not going to have good options for Fortify. Eventually, we're going to move to Entrench, but that costs 5 energy, so it's not really viable until we're level 3, and also it's a very expensive rarity that you can't afford in Act 1 depending on the difficulty. So, what am I saying here? Bluffs are the first thing to cut or the first thing to upgrade depending on your resources. Helping Hands are fantastic. Repair Armor is definitely required. Some sorts of Reinforce. Keep the guards for now, and Vulnerable is the best way you can help the team. Let's move into perks. Kind of now that we have an idea of what we're going to be doing with our game plan in this deck. Looks like Vulnerable, Reinforce, Fortify, and Block, of course. So let's go check out the perks. These 3 columns are your spare change. Spend there as you see fit. Heiner. One way to play Heiner is just assume he's always the slowest and don't worry about his speed. I personally still try to speed him up in front of at least some of the monsters, or if I have a plan to speed him up with one of my teammates, you'll want as much speed as possible, or manipulate your speed perks to make sure that he fits into that plan accordingly. So my plan, I have Gustav on the team, and he's gonna sing him a little bit of speedy song, and so this robot needs all 3 speed perks to fit into the line accordingly. Of course, energy is nice. Mark, it only costs 1 energy to pick it up. You only have a couple intimidates for Mark. This is really not required. I pick it up just because I have got lots of free perks lying around. The main thing you're going to be doing for Heiner is getting block. You want as much block as possible. You want that on items. You want that on perks. You want that everywhere and anything, because it helps your passive, and a lot of your cards and survivability is going to be in this block. So we go all the way down this icicle to the max amount of block charges. Picking up extra vulnerable charges, because we are going to be applying the vulnerable. And this, like I said, with that fusion laser, once you have fusion lasers online, like if the only card you play that has vulnerable on it is fusion lasers, you still want this perk. This is just so much value. That's 3 charges to the whole enemy team. That's 12 vulnerable charges just by picking up this one perk and only using fusion lasers. Everything else is gravy. It's just fantastic. And then Heiner, since you rely so much on Fortify, you do want to pick up this +1 Fortify charge. You can kind of fiddle around with some of these other Fortify ones, but none of them have impressed me. Play with them to your heart's content. I don't find any of them useful or required. Of course, we want the +1 card. We're not doing any sort of powerful charges, and we don't really have anything in the mystical tree either. So it's really just block, Fortify, vulnerable. This is the key page, and then all the leftovers as you see fit here. Heiner just does not rely on perks very much, other than, like I said, the specific ones that we picked up. And then I got a... Alright, what's next on the list? We got Act 2 deck list. Also, I apologize if my sound's off a little bit. I am working through some changes with my setup here. You might also hear some desk sounds that you weren't before. Please let me know if those are noticeable, and some input on those, because that is the most recent change that I need input on. Act 2 deck list. So, we still got the bluffs, we got the helping hands. This is a different save. This is on a Madness 14 save. The last one was a Madness 12. So even on Madness 14, I was able to fit in upgrades to these bluffs. I would say on 15 and 16, it's really pushing it on whether you can afford these or not. You'll probably not have the resources to upgrade them, but even up to 14, I was able to maintain these with a sufficiently efficient team building. So it's just nice to have empty card, like to have these to remove cards in my deck so that I can draw to the more important cards more often. Those are more important cards, of course, being Steelforge, the best card for him, and Entrench. Now that I've got the Entrench, I'm going to start cutting guards, because between Steelforge applying Fortify and Entrench applying Fortify, I'm really covered. As long as I can consistently draw one of these on turn 1, then my team should be set for the rest of the game to consistently having these fortify charges up, so now I just have to worry about applying block as efficiently as possible. And honestly, the most efficient way to apply block is entrench. So now that we have entrench, we're just going to keep going with that, because of all the things that say block, I can spell. There's nothing that outshines entrench, other than maybe like intercepts. But the problem with intercepts is just they're just a filler card, or repair armors. Repair armors are better than intercepts. So I'd say between repair armor and entrench, that's going to be all the block we need, other than our talent cards, which are fantastic. Let's see what else has changed here. We still have the Sundered Armor. It's definitely easy to start cutting this. I just haven't found something to replace it. If you need something else to replace it, let's go look at the Act 4 deck list here in a bit and kind of see what to add into the deck. But really, it's just getting this Steel Forge as soon as possible and getting it out and play as quick as possible. That is the end-all be-all. So, you know, whatever you can do to draw to it faster, the better. There are some ways to play around with Change Weapon, since bluffs are a melee attack. So this blue Change Weapon is an option. The problem is, since right now the only 2 attacks I have are these bluffs, it's kind of hit or miss on whether this will be effective, because you have to have 2 in the deck. And you don't want to be doing this this innate Change Weapon, because it costs 1 energy, and our energy efficient talent says we want to be drawing defense cards in our opening hand. So, like, you can play around with it if you need to, but eventually you'd rather move away from bluffs and go to enrages. Problem is, you can only craft 1 enrage, so it is what it is. Yeah, that's all for Act 2. Let's go look at items. So with the items, there are some items that are really only Heiner is like the only one that makes sense to play in, like Bastion. Bastion is this really fantastic, awesome armor, but no one wants to play it because it's got minus speed on it. Even Heiner, half the time I don't pick it up on Heiner because it's got minus speed on it, and I don't want my slow robot going slower. But if you just accept the fate of slow robot, then suddenly Bastion becomes a fantastic card. And if you recall, every time that what's that talent called? The Steel Forge. Every time Steel Forge hits, you are applying Fortified to your team. Even if it's not stacking, you're applying it. And so something like Bastion says, hey, look, block, block, block. You get tons of block charges. It's fantastic. Otherwise, Kite Shield and Heater Shield are the other great plus block charges ones. And those I mention specifically because Heiner is just one of the few heroes that will actually find use out of them. And then, of course, there's the Wall. The Wall is really great. It's fantastic. You'll be familiar with where to pick it up because it's the same place you unlock Heiner. We'll talk about that in a bit. But you either unlock Heiner when you go there, or you get the Wall when you go there. So, yeah. So when you got Heiner in the group, you just go pick up the Wall, and you're set. It is guaranteed, so it's pretty nice. It is, unfortunately, mutually exclusive with the Red Cape, which is another option that's actually pretty Heiner specific. Because if you recall, I said for the Steel Forge to trigger, Heiner has to be the one blocking and getting hit to trigger it for the rest of the team. Problem with that interaction is Red Cape says, hey, only target Heiner, and Steel Forge says apply block to your whole team. So a lot of that block gets wasted because Heiner has taunt. One of Heiner's starting card has taunt on it, but between if you have the Red Cape and your starting card, then you start to have a little too much taunt, because you want the taunt to get that initial charges going for your team, but then you want to drop the taunt so that the rest of your team can take the damage that you've provided so much block for, if that makes any sense. Like, you want to find this balance between Heiner taking hits and the rest of the team taking hits afterwards. So Red Cape's nice and all, and it is a guaranteed drop from the Cave Minotaur, but it is mutually exclusive with the Wall, and I find the Red Cape is less productive than just increasing block charges for the team. There are, of course, 2 very nice rings that do the same thing. Other than that, if you're not doing block charges in slow Heiner version, oh, and of course, Warrior Code plus vulnerable charges, fantastic. I was going to say, the other things you're going to be looking for are things that have vulnerable charges on them, which is really just the Iron Kanabo. Now, this one you can pick up in the same route as the Wall. So you can go fight these, what are these, goblins? Goblin Chieftain. Fight them, go north, go into the cave, and pick up the Wall. So you can pick up this and the Wall for Heiner in the red zone, which is pretty good pathing. I'll show you that in here in a bit towards the end of the thing. Just go look at the Heiner unlock if you want to skip ahead. So that's a guaranteed one. You can also go to the green zone to pick up the vulnerable charge there. And then if you don't need shield charge, you're not going vulnerable. The other thing that I would recommend for Heiner is speed. So we talked about succumbing to slow robot, but you can also speed slow robot up enough with things like boots of swiftness, cloak of speed, to get him outside of being slow pants, Mr. Slowmobile. Ooh, Slowmobile. That is Heiner's new name officially as of today for me, Mr. Slowmobile. Yeah. So either artificially speed him up or just succumb to the slowness that is Heiner, and get some block charges and some vulnerable charges. What else we got? I think that's everything for the items. Checking my list here. I moved my little sticky notes around. Let's put this in a better spot. I think we're on to Act 4 Decklist. Oh, pet. Pet. What is the best Heiner pet? So, of the pets for Heiner, I think Chompy is the one that like fits the most naturally into the block theme. Why can't my mouse isn't working, guys? Chompy applies AoE block to the whole team, and Heiner does that really well because he has lots of block charges. But honestly, what I'd really pick up for Heiner is Sharpie, just because it's a Dispel. Heiner's going to be your frontliner, he's going to be taking lots of debuffs. Sharpie says Dispel every turn. Whoops, there's my mouse working again. Every turn, Dispel one and get some fast. So it helps kind of if you're trying to speed up the robot, and just in general, keeping your robot clean, nice and pristine, kind of give it a spit shine. Shiny robot is best robot. And there's not really any other pets, I mean, other than Oculi, just to clear debuffs for the enemies before you apply Vulnerable. Because as the Vulnerable applier for the team, you want to make sure that Buffer does not exist on the enemies when you go to do so. Yep, that's it for pets. Let's go check out the Act 4 deck list. So, once we've gotten to Act 4, now we have to start thinking about the Archon fight. In the Archon fight, what do we want to be doing? Well, we want to be applying Fortify and Block to our team, keeping them alive, and we want to be removing the slows from our teammates. So, Helping Hand does that. You also want to upgrade these Helping Hands to yellow. I just don't have the shards for it. But by Act 4, if you still have these Helping Hands, switch them to yellow, because they will remove the insanity from the Archon fight. And so these will be fantastic. You don't necessarily have to do this now. There's just not really any shackle targets in Act 4, really. So I'd expect you could just switch to yellow right off the bat here in town. Otherwise, just make sure you do it right before the Archon fight on the final floor. Other than that, we're really relying on this Entrench, and now we've added Push Forward. These are just the only two cards that we're really relying on playing in the final fight. If you look at my cards that don't vanish, right now the only ones that don't vanish are the Helping Hands, the Battle Plan, which we'll talk to in a second, and the Push Forward and Entrench. Those are my final 5 cards. Those are what I expect to be playing in the very long fight of Archon, making sure my team is fast and fortified. And to do that, you're going to want to pick up a Blood Rage, which is kind of funny for a robot to be Blood Raging, but it is what it is. Steam Rage, we can call this Steam Rage. So Mr. Steam Rage here, you can go for the non-vanishing version, depending on how long you expect the fights to go. I think the Vanish version is perfectly fine. I've gone both ways in the 2 or 3 runs I did to practice for this video, and either way was fine. I personally kind of preferred the Vanish version just so that I didn't have it in my hand on bad draws if I had an injury in my deck or something. But that's just managing your final 5 cards. We've still got the Intimidates, we've still got the Bluffs, we've added in this Battle Plan. So unfortunately, Battle Plan does not, it's counterproductive with our Defense Mastery talent, but it is good enough just for the fact that I want to be drawing this Fusion Lasers and the Steel Forge on turn 1, and Battle Plan helps enable that happen. Ideally, I want to draw Enrage, Fusion Lasers, and Steel Forge all on turn 1, get my team nice and ready to get lots of block charges on them, and the enemy team all vulnerable up. But if I can't do that, that's fine. I can also just use the Battle Plan to set up for the next turn, plan out. Because what you do with Battle Plan is you can, if you're not going to play Entrench or Push Forward because you drew them from a bluff or something and they didn't get the discount, what you do with the Battle Plan is you then put them back on top of your deck so that you can draw them next turn so that you get that discount for them. So because you have this expensive defense card, Battle Plan can help you kind of play around it and make sure you get that +1, that 1 energy reduction for it. But Battle Plan also gets in the way because you didn't draw a card. So it's a little bit of a finesse, but it's a fun way to play around. I think Battle Plan's still worth it. It's definitely not as good as if this was a Bree, but you're still going to want it just because some turn 1 plays are better than others. What am I missing here in Act 4? I think that's everything. There's really not any better cards. We can't afford to play Citadels. They're just outside of our wheelhouse for energy. You also can't craft them. They're just really the most efficient block cards are Barricade, which we don't really like. Barricade could be a nice replacement. Oh, that's what it is. So right now I'm missing Repair Armor. You can see I've removed Repair Armor from my list. And the only reason I've done that is because Bree is here with the Battle Shout. So she's the one applying the Reinforce. If I wanted Heiner to still be doing it, I could either craft a Barricade or keep the Repair Armor. In Act 4, it starts to become less prevalent. It's mainly the twins you need the Reinforce for. So you want to make sure you have that one source of Reinforce for Heiner until the twins fight. And then after the twins fight, you could cut it. So you could go to 16 cards, go to the twins, take out the twins, and then at the top floor, remove that last Reinforce card. But honestly, any card that's worth playing for Reinforce, you might as well just keep in your deck. So make sure you leave town with a Barricade or a Repair Armor. Or in my case, I have Bree doing Battle Shout. So someone on the team should be getting Reinforced to Heiner because you don't want Heiner destroyed by the twins. Because of all the frontliners, Heiner is actually the most vulnerable to the twin fight just because Heiner is slow. Yeah, slow bot is dead bot. I think that's everything for Act 4. Let's go take a look at a combat. I think I had a combat ready. I think I even had a combat ready in another act, but I forgot to do it. My apologies. So, I don't remember if I was supposed to do Thorn Proliferation or not. Usually I do. I just kind of want to give you a look at kind of the play pattern for Heiner. So he starts with lots of Fortify charges. Let me play the other characters first here. I'm also on a new setup here, so my screen is all sorts of weird. So this Chant of Initiative sends Heiner, look at Heiner here. He is second to last in this turn order. And some of my teammates are kind of behind too. So unfortunately, I can't just do an AoE speed up my whole team because that would keep the robot behind the Andrin, and I want the robot in front of the Andrin, which you don't have to do, but for my setup, I want to do that. 1, 2 draws, 1, 2 draws, and a thing. Sarah, that's what I need. So let me just kind of power through these other turns right now. But I'm looking to use this Chant of Initiation on the robot. Whoops, I screwed up. We're fine. 2 back. Melodic. I know how to play this character. I really do. Alright, so robot went faster now because I had a teammate speed him up, which is sometimes what you got to do. So bluffs, you got to play them first before you play the battle plans because battle plans put cards back on top. So you got to draw with your other cards first. So bluff, drew an enrage. As you can see, I gotta go through all this. Now I got fusion lasers. So fusion lasers triggers 3 times. So I'm actually going to use battle plans as one of the triggers. And you can see none of them have vulnerable here. But I'm going to go fusion lasers, battle plans. Put 2 back on top. I have 5 energy, 4, 5. That's perfect. So I don't need the blood rage. I want the push forward. So I think I'm going to get rid of an intimidate. So that was 1 charge. That was 1 activation of my lasers, 2 to everything. Now, Steel Forge first because it gives block charges. And now my entrench is bigger. And as you can see, I've got 9 vulnerable on the enemy team with I have no equipment that's increasing my charges. I don't have anything that's doing plus vulnerable charges here. And I still got 9 just on my turn. So that's why the play pattern is important and the battle plans I think is very efficient. And then I got this push forward to help speed up the rest of my team because since Gustav had to speed up the robot by himself, the robot's in charge of speeding up the rest of the team because Android's a little slow in this team comp for reasons. And then I got a little more vulnerable to apply to their enemy team. Kapow. And let's see what they do with their turn. Yes, you don't have to plan on killing the enemy team all in one turn. I normally try to because I can, and I enjoy that. But if not, you can see I've got plenty of blocks set up on my team, and I now have fortified charges on everyone. So this block, if it's not used this round, will be ready for next round. And we are just going to play out this round because I don't have a better idea of what I want to do. All these howls are wasted because Heiner did Heiner things and just blasted the vulnerable mess with fusion lasers of the bad guys. So, go Heiner. Doot, 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 doot. So I could leave them all alive, and we could see what this. Let's just leave them all alive. So I think you guys have seen me do this enough where I can just destroy the enemy team with the Master of Blades himself. I'm just going to play out his turn a little bit here. We're going to leave them a bit alive afterwards, though. Let's see what happens. I haven't done this yet on this setup. Slicey, sneaky strike. Because ideally you should be killing one of them off, so maybe I'll just kill one. Nah, that's going to kill too many of them. So we'll just see what happens. So I could have killed their whole team. You've seen it before. I've done this fight before on other team videos. But every time Heiner takes a hit, look at all those pretty shield charges on the rest of the team. And this is why I'm saying taunt is not actually good for Heiner. Oh, I forgot to mention it. I did cut his lasers. So his starting card, I did cut the starting card mainly because it has taunt. And secondly, because all it does is apply block to himself. It doesn't apply it to the team. And as you can see, the team is still super healthy. We've got plenty of block charges. And then on Heiner's next turn, he's super slow again because he's a frontliner. He got hit by slows and debuffs and stuff like that. So unfortunately, even though I sped him up on the first turn, Heiner is just always going to be the slowest robot. So that's why it's important that you get these fortified charges and these high block up. And I used all these still 4 charges on that first turn so that my team is super healthy because robot is last in line again and slowbot is slowbot. Yep, that's all I got. Let's resign this. What else do we need to talk about? We need to talk about unlock and team comps. Let's do unlock first, and then we'll talk about team comps. I was supposed to leave that save intact, but I screwed up. So let's just look at the unlock first, and then I'll have to pull that save back up for us to look at. So for the unlock, Heiner starts in... Heiner on the map is right here. You go find him, you talk to him, he gives you the quest line, you accept it, and then he says, hey, go find a fusion core. Well, he doesn't say it. You look at his disassembled body and say, oh, maybe I need to power him back up. To do so, you got to go to the Black Forge. There's a couple paths to get there. You can either cut across the Goblin Chieftain fight, which you have to take the fight. You can't accept the Minotaurs. You have to kill the Goblins and then go across the bridge. Or you go across here to the arena and then go in here. You got to go to the Black Forge. There is an event to get in, which you might get burned. But I think you're guaranteed to get in, even if you have injuries doing so. And then you'll get the Fusion Core, and that'll unlock Heiner. And then later, this is also the path where you get the Wall, which is that really cool shield card for Heiner. And this is where you get that Kanabo, which is that plus vulnerable charges. So if you're going to pick up the Wall, and you don't have reason to go to the arena, I also just recommend going to the Goblin Chieftain too. Come up here, fight the Goblins, go across the bridge, go in here, get the shield. So you get the weapon and the shield for Heiner, which turns out you can carry both. So it's really great. It's fantastic. Now we have to go look at the... what's it called? Whoops. Don't mind me. I got to pull that save back up. 1 second. Because now we're going to be looking at team comps. So with that, we want... Heiner goes pretty well with everyone, but we'll take a look at his current team I've got him with. So we're going to look at Gustav first, because Gustav here is speeding up Heiner with his Chant of Initiative. Gustav's had this the entire game. He had 2 copies to begin with. Now he's got 1 copy because his deck's efficient. I just want Heiner to go first on turn 1 to have a chance for those fusion lasers and or just blocking up the team. And then eventually I just fate says Heiner's going to go slow for the rest of the game. But here's the deck. Here's some of the equipment. Doesn't really matter. And then here are the Gustav perks. You may see these on the other videos. If you want more details on these, go check those out in these specific videos. I think all of these characters have their own video right now that released this week. Andrin here is my damage dealer. Andrin here requires vulnerable on the enemy team from the Heiner and the Bree to go pew pew slash slash die die, all the good things. And then Bree is back up to Heiner. So Heiner, before he had fusion lasers, was not applying as much vulnerable. But once you have fusion lasers, it is just game over, man, for all the monsters, because turns out a fusion laser is as dangerous as it sounds. It it cuts away all of your armor and makes you very vulnerable to the bad guys. By the bad guys, I mean the good guys being me, because I am the dangerous one in this setup. Alright, team comps. Otherwise than what I did. So, Heiner goes... Don't mind that team comp, you don't know what that is. You didn't see that. Heiner's Slowbot. So, Slowmobile needs either someone to speed him up or people that don't require a fast team. So, mages and healers are inherently slow, so you can pair them in here pretty well with that. Otherwise, the scouts are the best at speeding the robot up. So, if you're planning on speeding him up, you got to bring a scout. Otherwise, Heiner, there's a reason Heiner was my grind from like Madness 3 to Madness 12. Is because he's just so reliable in a, like, I don't have to do much to make the robot succeed. It's just in the later game that the speed becomes a handicap for your team. Because Heiner's really good at applying Fortify, any sort of other mass shielders are pretty good. So Otis and Bree come to mind. Bree is a support, or Magnus is a support, I guess, for Otis as a healer. Because since Otis's healing is based on shield, and Heiner has the Fortify, you'll be reaching max amounts of block on your team pretty fast. That is a little dangerous for Heiner when you go to the Archon fight, but otherwise is a pretty clean thing. In case you're wondering, for the Archon fight, the more shield you have, the more dangerous it is for your frontliner. If you have restricted power on, you can't die to the effect, but if you have restricted power off, this could be a dangerous combo in the fact that Heiner might have too much block for the final fight. Other than that, there's really not much synergy to talk about with Heiner, and I think we're done with this video. If you liked what you saw, please let me know with some comments of what you liked, what you didn't like. Compliments go a long way to keeping me motivated. Also accept tips right now. That's the heart below the screen and above the comments, and I will catch you later. Peace.